Here on the episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords of Fates Warning. Of course, we're going to be talking about Jim Matheos, and Fates Warning formed in Hartford, Connecticut in 1982 and spearheaded the prog-metal movement in the early to mid-80s. And Fates Warning, along with Queensryche, definitely kind of just ignited this bonfire of progressive rock and metal, and definitely directly influenced bands like Dream Theater and Symphony X, and a lot of the groups that kind of followed in Queensryche and Fates Warning's footsteps. So Fates Warning's very respected, and they've had, 12 studio albums, a couple live albums, compilations, and then Jim has done a whole bunch of additional work. He's worked with OSI, with members of Dream Theater, namely Kevin Moore, but also he brought in James Labrie and Mike Portnoy too. And he's worked on a lot of different projects with different musicians, and here's an image with some of the people that Jim's worked with in his career. There's a lot you can learn from this band. They're unusual, they're different. It's not your traditional, metal group or prog metal group. There's a lot going on in their music, and they have heavy riffs and power chords and leads and all this stuff. But then also, if you go through their material, go through all their albums, you'll hear these kind of eerie and sinister, clean guitar parts, acoustic guitar, nylon string guitar. And Jim actually has kind of dove into that on his, solo album, some solo material. And he's released a lot of acoustic, kind of mellow, ambient, instrumental music, which is really different than Fates Warning. But you can tell his heart is really into this kind of eerie, clean, kind of, sinister chords and these lush, chord voicings and progressions. Really cool stuff. I just flashed that image, but this lesson is going to be 100% clean, or clean channel. I'm not talking about my language, I'm talking about my guitar tone. But we did have a clean lesson recently in the Pink Floyd Chordplay, and here we are, following that with Fates Warning. And a lot of players, especially metalheads, they think they have to have tons of distortion and scooped mids and this massive heavy guitar tone to sound like metal. And yeah, you definitely have to have some, distortion, and, you think of Metallica and Pantera and some of these bands, and that's the sound, that heavy abrasive distortion. But to me, when I listen to metal music, anytime there's like an acoustic guitar or a clean guitar, it delivers this eerie, sound, which is way more scary and horrific sounding than just a bunch of dirty power chords. Power chords are cool, and pinch harmonics or whatever. But really, if we're talking about scary music or Halloween, type of stuff, to me, it's those clean guitar parts and the acoustic parts, and sometimes even acoustic piano, in a metal song can bring out this horrific, scary sound where it's kind of disturbing, when you hear it. The opening, that was A World Apart from Perfect Symmetry. And, this is definitely kind of the epitome of what I was talking about earlier with these kind of eerie or kind of spooky chords, and they're implied, but he's really starting with a C octave and then hits the open B string and lets that ring, and that's implying C major 7, but it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like this, so it has that very unsettled, dissonant kind of flavor. And then he follows that with A flat major 7, an A flat octave, and then the open G string right there. And then right there he goes from F, hits the open G to G, and then hits the open G. Or he just hits the G note, not the open G again. But that's kind of flirting with an implied, G7, G dominant 7, because there's your flat 7, there's the root, and then the root again. So it's implied. But when you put that together, it has this very unsettling, kind of scary tonality. And I also figured out a way to kind of challenge my fret hand. You may have noticed that, where I use my index and third for the first octave shape, and And then I use my middle and pinky for the second one. Now you don't have to play it that way. You could just shift, your fingering over like this. But I did that intentionally just to challenge my hand. It's kind of a slow, kind of simple, guitar part. And doing it this way makes it much more difficult and more of a challenge. Stuff like that. It's very haunting and just has this mysterious, kind of just horrific kind of sound where it sounds like it's part of a horror movie. The next example comes from Damnation, and this is from Fates Warning's first album, Night on Bröcken. And I believe Bröcken is a forest in Germany that's associated with witches. So that's definitely appropriate for Metal Month and Halloween and, scary stuff. But you can see I've switched to a nylon string guitar. This is my quarantine guitar that I got back in March of this year. That's a La Petrie, made by Godin, Seagull and Godin up in Canada. Great guitar. But Damnation looks like this. Definitely seen this chord a lot, on this channel and in the Chordplay series, everywhere from Pink Floyd to Metallica, and here we are, Fates Warning, and we're seeing it again, but that's an E minor add 9, and he's really just kind of picking through it, finger picking that is. And then right there it's an implied C major 7. Like a little melodic, motif happening right there. And then a G over B implied. The next example comes from the song Monument from Inside Out, and there's some really cool stuff going on here. Something like this. In the very beginning right here, he's actually, Jim's actually smacking or, hitting artificial harmonics by smacking or, literally tapping the strings, but you're smacking an octave higher than where you're fretted right here. So this, that's a C sharp minor 7, technically. The 4th fret on the A, the 6th fret on the D and the G, and then the open B and open high E. C sharp minor 7, and he's literally smacking, on the 16th and 18th fret right there, and just hitting the strings, and it produces a harmonic, technically, kind of a harmonic chord slap. And then the second chord right here, this is really cool. That's an A major 13 sus2. And then right there, he's literally kind of smacking here. So he's not really addressing the whole chord. He's really just targeting, that highest note right there, which is the F sharp. So you're not really worried about the entire chord. You're not worried about the open strings up there. He's really just kind of smacking part of the chord, which is going to cause it to ring, but you're also hearing a little bit of the harmonic in there too, which is so cool. After you're done hitting your guitar, it goes to this. And that That's technically what, a C sharp minor 9, I'm sorry, C sharp minor add 9 over G sharp right there. C sharp minor add 9 over G sharp, and then it moves back to this, and that's really just a little piece of B sus2. And then the C sharp minor add 9 over G sharp again, and then a little bit more of B sus2. I guess it's technically B sus2 over F sharp because that's your lowest note right there. But those are really interesting chords too. They have this eerie, kind of haunting flavor. Next up is Leave the Past Behind from Parallels, and once again there's some really interesting chords happening here. Something like this. So right there, once again, we have, a couple fretted notes with an open string, kind of ringing open, and that's going to function as F sharp sus4, like that. And then right there, that's A sus2 over E. So definitely Jim's a big, fan of sus chords, and definitely you can hear sus chords all over, rock music, in classical and other styles of music too. But unlike, say, someone like Eddie Van Halen, who also uses a lot of sus chords, Eddie uses it in passing. He'll grab, say, a major or a minor chord, and then fill it out with some sus chords and moves back and forth. Whereas Jim's strategy is he targets the sus chord, and that's the tonality. It's not, really revolving around a major or a minor chord, and then the sus chords are passing chords. Like literally in Jim's world, the sus chords are the chord. One more time there. The next example is from the same song, Leave the Past Behind, and it's the next section of the song. And once again, I'm using the TC Electronic Ditto Looper to recreate this because there's a trio of guitars playing together. And once it gets going, he layers more, overdubs and guitars in there. But there is kind of a trio of guitars that you catch. And it's really interesting the way they work together. So the first guitar part is doing this. This kind of single note, motif, and kind of loosely based around, F sharp 7, I guess, and it's hitting the 4th there too, that B note, but it's not really a chord, it's just, single notes. Something like that. And then, once he establishes that part, which I've already looped it, then he starts doing this. This chord, that's an F sharp 7 sus 4 with those open strings added. But that's mimicking the single note part we started with. And that's really crafty. I like that. And then once those two parts are established, then a third guitar comes in, and he's really just going back to sus2 chords. There's a C sharp sus2 to an implied F sharp minor, and then a B sus2 to C sharp sus2. So he starts doing this over those other two parts, which is so cool. The last example comes from the song Lighthouse, which is from the album Darkness in a Different Light. And I'll be honest, I was not familiar with this song until I put this lesson together. And I had all these requests, that actually started coming in from last year. And I noticed Fates Warning, kind of kept coming up. And I thought, wow, they want Fates Warning. And I know I put it off, like I explained earlier. But one thing that I did do in preparation for this lesson is I actually sat down and I listened to every single Fates Warning album, every song. You know, I just dove in and I wanted to find, you know, what I was going to cover in this lesson. And when I kept finding these clean guitar parts and acoustic guitar, nylon string guitar, and these eerie chords and stuff, I just fell in love with it, and I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. And this song, like I said, I'd never really heard it before, but I think now suddenly this is my favorite, you know, Fates Warning song. It's really cool. And we're technically in double drop D, but for this example, we're really not going to play the low E string, but we are going to be playing the high E string, which is tuned down to D. So double drop D really just means that both your low E and your high E are tuned down to D. And the guitar part for Lighthouse looks like this. And then it repeats. But that's so cool, and I love the fact that he's targeting the high E string, which is now tuned down to a D. But then you have this really eerie, you know, guitar part. So that's really just D minor right there. You know, a fancy D minor because of the tuning. And then when you hear it drop down, that's basically C minor over D. And of course you have that, that D note up on the top too, so it's like a D minor or a C minor 9 over D. And then move back up to that D minor again. And then it changes to D major temporarily. And then back to D minor. C minor 9 over D, and then move it all the way down here where you've got the second and third fret on the B and the G string, and that's going to be a D major 7 sharp 5. But you put all that together and you have the opening for Lighthouse. It's like the opening, you know, the intro and the verse. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with the Chords of Fates Warning, and definitely, you know, I've learned some things from putting this lesson together. Mainly the requests, you know, kind of steered me here. And then once I was here, I just started checking everything out, you know, listening to albums and going through and doing a little bit of research and getting more acquainted with Jim's style. And as soon as I noticed this trend or habit of these clean, kind of sparkly and eerie chords blended with distorted, you know, power chords and leads and stuff like that, it was like, yeah, this guy's amazing. And I can't believe I really haven't visited Fates Warning, you know, that intently until right now, you know, when I put this together. And now I'm going to go back and start listening to some of these albums a little bit closer. So anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content material. Thank you.